Greetings, happy Labor Day. I'm giving you a question and answer screencast since we don't have class tonight for Module A. So I'm going to go through the slides quickly. There we go. So in Module 1, you started your lesson design. You all have done a very nice job putting together your content standards, goals, and objectives. They're all very clear. For the most part, they're all very clear and really well ordered and structured for a good lesson. So in Module 2, we're going to stay with Stage 1 and we're going to back step just a little bit, and we're going to identify the big idea for your lesson and ultimately for your unit, and develop enduring understandings and essential questions for the goals and objectives that you've created. So if a reminder that UBD, Understanding by Design, is called backwards design because we're integrating curriculum and instruction and assessment within a unit of study in the discipline that you choose. You're creating a lesson and will be creating unit design template for beginning with the end in mind. That's the big piece, with the end in mind. You're thinking about where you're going and then building it toward that piece. It is a way to enhance meaningful understanding and transfer of learning for the content for your students. So I want to talk a little bit about small u and big U. Most of you have got it. The small u is one that we don't use in your lesson plans, but it basically is, small u refers to very specific things. I want the students to understand, for example, the U.S. Constitution, the 3 branches of government. So those things you need action verbs for because they have to actually demonstrate somehow that they know and understand something about the U.S. Constitution, whatever it is you want them to understand. Or what about the 3 branches of government, not just to list them off the top of their head, but to explain them. So the little u's need not to be used, and instead of the little u, you need to use an active verb. There is the big U, the big understanding. And this is the overall intent of your lesson and eventually your unit, and that's what the big ideas will be referring to. I want students to understand that the U.S. Constitution was a solution based on a compromise to real and pressing problems and disagreements in government. They were a brilliant balance and limit of powers. So that's huge. That's a big understanding. That's capital U. That's like the framework that you're housing a lesson and the unit in. So you're not using the big U's right now, but this is something you're keeping in mind as you're developing your lesson, because this is something that your unit will be addressing. So we're going to talk about big ideas. Big ideas, and you'll get more of this in the module itself when you watch the screencast in the module, are the core ideas for any kind of lesson or unit that you're developing. For backwards design, the big ideas for backwards design are itself backwards design, that plans need to be aligned and effective. And if they're not aligned and effective, for example, you aligned your objectives with your transfer goals, then you have twin sins, aimless activity, and coverage. The transfer goal as a big idea, transfer as goal, is the essence of understanding and the point of schooling. It's like, what is it that we're teaching them that they're going to take away with them into their lives? Students fail to apply learning, so it's always relevant and relative to students' lives. Understanding via big ideas, and that's the big U. How transfer occurs. It creates connections in learning. That's the understanding. If you don't have big ideas and a focus on understanding with a giant U, you get fragmented learning, more difficult and less engaging instruction and material, because you're not thinking about where you're going, and you're really not even thinking about the students. The next big idea of UBD is meaningful learning. This engages and invites students into, you're teaching into their lives. If it's not meaningful learning, the plans need to be well aligned to be effective, and even so, they're not going to be as effective as if the learning is related to students' lives in the present and in the future. UBD fosters transfer of learning to create independent problem solvers. This is the idea, is that you're actually teaching them to become independent thinkers. we want to equip them with understanding, skills, and knowledge that are essential to real-life situations. And we'll talk about this again. So he's making, in science, a ramp, and his goal is to make this car go fast. So which one is going to be more effective, and how far will it roll, depending on the ramp that he designs. So it's a real life. Depending on the person, they will use this understanding in their life in general, even if it's just when they're driving a car. So we're still in stage 1. We're still identifying desired results. What is it that I want the students to understand, know, and be able to do? You have established your goals, and you've created your objectives. Students will know, and students will be able to do by the time they're done. And they're related. Now we're going to move to the enduring understandings and essential questions. And I did this for a reason. I wanted you to get the content, kind of the context of your lesson down before we really look at it from a step back. As I said, we're going to step back. So first we're going to look at the big idea. These are words that conceptualize big ideas, but a big idea isn't just a word. But all of these things, as you can see, they're large concepts, patterns in math, diversity in culture, cycles in science, in geography, in math, even in literature, perspective, abundance. There can be so many. All of these are different concepts that can be used in the design of big ideas for your lessons. So let's look at, okay, we're going to be looking at enduring understandings. There's more about big ideas in the Module 2. Their enduring understandings are what a student's going to come away with. They're going to understand the big picture. Again, these are the big U's, the capital, the big giant U's, the big understandings. Understand the cycles of nature, that everything in nature has a cycle. So they're written as generalizations. They're framed around big ideas. They're beyond specific content. So they're not specific content, but they can relate to the content that you're teaching. It cuts to the core of the discipline. It's the overall aha, like at the end, they're going to say, oh yeah. It starts with students will understand that. So again, you're thinking big U. Not facts, definitions, trite statements, the obvious, duh. So let me give you some examples. So we have a big idea. The big idea for a unit is time is relative. That's very Einsteinian, but you can do many things even with young children with this big idea. And the enduring understanding that I want them to come away with when we're done with this time unit, or even the lesson, well, the lesson is in service of the unit. We measure time to give structure to our lives. So I understand we're all using time functionally, but it can be measured in a lot of different ways. Or another big idea, art is culture. It's not just an obvious thing. It's something that a person has to learn and understand, but it's true worldwide. But the enduring understanding that I want my students to come away with, as you create art, you are showing people how you view the world, your culture. And then the extension would be them understanding other world cultures through art. A third big idea, writing reflects life. We hope. Even fantasy does, believe it or not. Maybe in an exaggerated fashion. So an enduring understanding I want my writers to come away with is that effective writers think about their audience as they plan and write. So they have to think beyond themselves when they're writing and think about who's going to be reading my writing. And so when they start planning any kind of writing, they'll think about their audience. But my lesson is going to lead to a piece of that. So this is a big idea and an enduring understanding. So it's still related to your content, but it's still broad. It's the big U. It's the big understanding. So we talked about this just a minute ago. The U.S. Constitution was a solution-based compromise to real and pressing problems. That's a really big understanding. How would you make that to an enduring understanding smaller for students? You have to think about that. We would if we were together. So you want to create your enduring understandings specific enough so the students can access it. It means something to them, not some broad esoteric enduring understanding that, is only understood by the highest elite in universities. We don't want that kind of enduring understanding. We want the kind that the students going to come away with, that they can connect their lives with. You're teaching into their lives. You're teaching into their lives. So how even this could create, what is the importance? Well, let's talk about the questions. What is the importance of creating a constitution? Why was that important, right? That's a question. It's a very good essential question. So the enduring understandings lead us to ask questions. They lead us to want to know what it takes to understand that. They push us to the heart of things. Essential questions do. They cause genuine and relevant inquiry into big ideas and core content. They provoke deep thought, lively discussion, sustained inquiry, new understanding, and more questions. So essential questions are not fact-finding questions. They're not, what are the 10 amendments to the Constitution? That is not an essential question. That is a test question. Essential questions look different, and I'll show you some examples in a minute. Essential questions require students to consider alternatives, weigh evidence, support ideas, and justify answers. And in this day of fake news, this is especially important. They cause students to rethink and recalibrate their thinking. So something will change, we hope. If they didn't know it to start with, they'll readjust and understand why their thinking changes. Like, how do negative numbers exist? I had a student who couldn't understand negative numbers, and we had to go through it. Negative numbers are a concept and an understanding all of themselves, and he couldn't make that abstract movement into negative numbers for the longest time. So eventually he got it. He rethought it. He understood it. He came to an understanding of negative numbers. So stimulates vital, ongoing rethinking of big ideas, assumptions, and prior lessons. They spark meaningful connections with prior learning and personal experiences. So it's not just a bunch of little pieces that don't fit together. They all connect, and the connections are shown. How do all the pieces connect? Pieces that may not seem like they connect. How do they connect? And this is what I get back to when we talk about transfer. It naturally recur, creating opportunities for transfer to other situations and subjects. So your transfer goal that you've already created leads you to making transferable activities and objectives, even though it's an essential question. The principle of transfer is that the more similar two situations are, the greater the chances the learning from one situation will be transferred to the next. So the implication for you is that you involve students in learning situations and tasks that are similar as possible to the situations where they would apply the tasks. I'll talk about that again. So your essential questions, just like your enduring understandings, are designed in student-friendly language in their point of view, so it's relative to them. The essential questions are edgy, lending themselves to debate, open-ended and complex enough to house multiple perspectives and more than one answer. They address the heart of the content area. Therefore, essential content knowledge will be needed to answer it. So that's where you as a teacher are a purveyor of materials and information for students to use and manipulate. You empower the students to take ownership of their own learning, and it leads to student-created questions and student taking action with this new knowledge. So it's very constructivist. Essential questions essentially are constructivist. You're giving them something to look and inquire about, and they have to construct their understanding of it with the materials and the means that you provide to them. So here's some examples of the essential questions. So again, we have our big ideas. Everything's related to the big idea of your unit or lesson. So our big idea of time is relative. An example of an essential question would be, how would life be different if we couldn't measure time? Great question. This question is not an essential question. How many minutes are in an hour or a day? That is a test item. This is not an essential question. The next big idea, art is a reflection of culture. An essential question would be, in what ways does art reflect as well as shape culture? This is a great question because it not only talks about the creative product, but the effect of the product. The question, between what years did the Italian Renaissance occur, is a test item. It is not an essential question. Big idea, writing reflects life. How do effective writers hook and hold their readers? How do they? And it depends on the genre, it depends on your reading interests, it's on so many things. So it leads to this great discussion, because your students, at least some of the older ones, and probably the younger ones if they've had a lot of literature instruction, will have some ideas of what they like to read and why. What is not a question, an essential question, is what is foreshadowing? Can you find an example? That is a test item, that is an instructional piece of information. This is not an essential question. So you're really looking at them, really getting to the crux of things, but being thought-provoking. It's not telling or asking for specific information. There's no right answer to any of these. And that's good. That's what you want the essential question. You want people to be right in many ways. So you have a big idea sheet. I want you to work on this sheet. I want you to complete each of these in a very nice and complete sentence or phrase, just so that they reiterate, but I want you to think about your big ideas for your lesson and eventually your unit. You're going to complete the big idea worksheet. You're going to complete the enduring understandings and essential questions. These are going to be related to your knowledge and skill objectives. This isn't exactly the same framework as your template, but these are the same elements. So you've already got these, and you're going to add these. When you meet with your critical friends, these are the questions that are in the rubric. Are essential questions challenging, and do they provoke thinking and inquiry? Do they get at the heart of the discipline? Are they written in student-friendly language? Do the enduring understandings describe the most important understandings that will emerge from the unit? There are so many, just pick one that's relative to what you've already started working on. There's so many. But make sure it gets aligned with your transfer goals and objectives, because they all need to align together. EQs and AUs, do they reflect and elicit deep understanding of content that connects to multiple disciplines? Do they address questions that are counterintuitive, which means that they don't necessarily make sense, which require investigation and deep thinking? Do they have comprehensive power to explain phenomena like time and measuring time? Do they clarify the priority concepts of the topic, coherent connection to the topic, and take your learner beyond the basic inquiry? So with that, your CFUs are due on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Your big idea worksheet enduring understandings and essential questions are due. And those of you that are revising your assignment number 1, please revise those. And again, I'm glad I'm just having you do one, because when you revise them, they're turning out very, very well. I'm really pleased. When you submit, you're using the same template you've already used, and you're putting the new material in red. The old material is going to be in black, the material you've done, and any revisions you do should be in red. Please submit revisions to the same section you want regraded. I can't give you a grade on a past section in a different section because the rubrics are independent of each other. In other words, I'm grading each section alone. So if you submitted enduring understandings and essential questions in Module 1, it doesn't get graded because I'm not grading that in Module 1. I'm grading that in Module 2 as an example. Thank you, the reviser. So if you have any questions or any insights, I expect that you'll email me and let me know. Have fun this week with your lessons, and I hope you had a great weekend.